let's turn to Afghanistan because this is you and I have been, talking in this context for 18 years, maybe. I think to a large extent, you were a blogger in the early aughts, largely a function. I think for a lot of bloggers, anyways, was a reaction to the Bush election, but also more so, I think, like in many respects, the war.
Yeah.
The war, and I think for a lot of people, it was more about Iraq, but it was about our entire reaction to 9/11. And I think there was not, going to Afghanistan was not as an invading Afghanistan was not as controversial as Iraq was, at that time. But I think it quickly became just as controversial in many respects, and certainly through the years with the drone wars, and we've been there now for almost 20 years. Joe Biden announced earlier this week that we're leaving by 9/11 unconditionally. It is not a facts on the ground. It's not an assessment. There is no context in which we would stay past that date. There is no solution. It is I don't think it's quite a slam dunk. But it's definitely the thing that we should do. But I think people should understand that on a large part, we went in there, we broke it. And the point is we can't fix it, but it's still broken. And it's gonna, and that breakage is gonna cost people in Afghanistan. And we need to mitigate it, but we broke it, and it's broken. Right? I mean, that's the whole thing. It's just broken.
Absolutely. And the 20 years that we've been there has, made it has made, very little difference. It's not to say it hasn't made none, and it had made any, because there is some belief that the country has, changed in some fundamental ways that may make it possible to mitigate some of what we're seeing as maybe the worst case scenario with the Taliban taking over and going back to the way it was in the late 90s, which, let's face it, that was partially our doing as well. I mean, we armed the Mujahideen, we don't need to go into the whole history there, but, that whole thing,
we should to a certain extent. I mean, we armed the Mujahideen against the Soviet Union. We encouraged and funded the madrasas in Pakistan as a way of, and Osama bin Laden as a way of fighting the Soviets. So we created this monster that we are now going to leave the country to.
Right. We've been involved there for a very long time, longer than just the invasion of Afghanistan after 9/11. I mean, we were there long before in involving ourselves in that. And, think about that for a minute. I mean, you had the Soviet invasion there, and which was a disaster for them as well. And we decided to use that as one of our many proxy wars against the, communism. That blew up in our face, just like Vietnam blew up in our face. I mean, this keeps happening. These proxy wars, these small wars that we continue. I mean, I guess it's better than having a world war or a nuclear war, but nonetheless, it's still war, and it ends up being disastrous for everybody involved. And this one, I mean, it was such a knee-jerk reaction. I remember thinking it at the time, and you were barely allowed to even think these things, if you recall,
Yep.
the hysteria after 9/11. But I remember thinking when George Bush went to the World Trade Center and stood on the rubble with the firemen, and everybody was crying, and and he gave his bullhorn moment, which was considered to be the greatest thing since Winston Churchill, or FDR saying we have nothing to fear but fear itself. And he said, we're coming to get them real soon. I hear you, and we're going to get them real soon, or whatever he said. And all of that just seems so primitive to me. I remember hearing it and just kind of going, really? I mean, I get it. I mean, I understand the impulse. I'm not immune. 9/11 was a a nightmare. It was one of the most traumatic things that's ever happened to this country. I get it. But the idea that our government would respond in such a, with such primitive passion to a situation they understood from, well, maybe they didn't understand, but many people understood, was extremely complicated, and it was not going to get any less complicated, and God knows it didn't, because they immediately pivoted to Iraq, and then we really made a mess of things. But even Afghanistan itself, even that particular, the way that we had of dealing with it, there was a cathartic aspect to it. It's like when a bear comes into town and mauls somebody, they immediately rush out with their guns and they kill a bear. It doesn't even matter which one it is, just as long as you kill something to sort of, get your revenge on whatever it is. That was kind of the feeling. It was so primitive. And I thought, God, we're a military superpower, the most powerful military on earth in human history. And this is how we react. I mean, we don't have any more sophistication than that. There's no way that we can kind of go forward here more thoughtfully. And it wasn't just the neocons and the Republicans, at least at that juncture. We had the whole Congress out singing "God Bless America" on the steps of the Capitol. I mean, this was an American response. And, like I said, I don't want to say that I don't understand the feeling, but on an intellectual basis, I was always, and it was one of the reasons why I started writing, in that format that I was writing, was just, really, this is the best we can do. I mean, here it is. It's, we're in the 21st century, and we can't respond with any more I don't know, sophistication than this. And so that was the beginning. And it was like everybody knew that it was going to be different. It was going to be impossible to get out. Everybody knew that what they were getting in. Remember, there was all this talk. I mean, it was called, what did they call it? The graveyard of empires, right?
Yes.
I mean, history has said from the beginning. So was it hubris? I mean, no country on earth is less entitled to hubris in this particular regard than the United States of America, because Vietnam had just ended, but 25 years before. So there was, 25 years before. So there was no reason for us to think that we were somehow going to go in there. But that was, of course, that's another story. That's the neocon, starry-eyed neocons bringing democracy to the rest of the world. And the whole thing is just is maddening. And here we are, and it's broken. And we broke it. A lot of people helped, but we broke it. And now we're going to have to live with that failure on both a moral and a political basis. And, I frankly admire Biden for having the guts to do that as a Democrat, because I think that people were hoping it would be a Republican who would get out of this thing. Richard Nixon was the one who pulled the plug on Vietnam finally. And I think that was a relief to a lot of Democrats, because the Democrats had to, bear the burden of the defeat in Vietnam. And Joe Biden will probably have to bear that burden as well, in the minds of many people in the United States.
And I don't think he's going to pay that big of a price of it. I mean, we didn't, somehow there was no, there was talk of Obama, when he pulled out, and it leading to ISIS and whatnot. And, we still have a massive presence in Iraq in the form of an embassy, if you can call it that. I mean, it's really sort of just like a massive compound. But the responsibility that we have to Afghanistan, when we went in there, I'm sure you remember, part of the sales pitch was like, we're not gonna leave it in ruins. We're going in there and we're gonna do, like, in fact, Bush had to sort of took some heat from like supposedly nation building, because he had said during the campaign that he wasn't going to do any nation building. And in fact, we were supposedly going in there to nation build. And the Taliban were horrible to women at that time. And there's every reason to believe that they're going to be horrible to women again. Women have made some advances in Afghanistan, from my understanding, but not necessarily huge, broad, widespread because you still have like, the government can do one thing, but culturally there's still problems there. But it's just announced today that the Biden administration, according to the New York Times, is going to keep the target of refugee admissions this year at the historically low level set by the Trump administration, walking back an earlier pledge to welcome more than 60,000 refugees in the United States, supposedly because of the optics of what's going on with the immigration at the border, which is absurd and obscene. And we owe Afghanistan so much. The bare minimum is to open our doors to Afghanis who believe that when the Taliban comes in, they are going to be killed because of their involvement with the U.S. presence over 20 years, or that that they just want a better life because of what the Taliban is certainly going to end up. May not happen immediately, but over time, that's what's going to happen in that country. And the idea that we wouldn't fulfill that obligation, right? Like these people need to come and come now. And the idea that we wouldn't fulfill that obligation after what we've done in that country is just obscene. It's just obscene. And the political reasons are absurd. The idea like there's going to be a big outcry of like Afghani civilians coming into this country. I mean, give me a break. It's
even if there is, who cares? I mean,
right, right.
that's irrelevant. And it's interesting because I didn't realize that Joe Biden, and apparently in his first year as a senator, and it's really, he's been around a long time, was during the debate over the Vietnamese refugees that were, had helped the United States through that long ordeal and were in danger in Vietnam. And apparently Biden was against it then, and against bringing those Vietnamese back. Now, it seems completely bizarre to me that, Mr. Compassion, whose entire, presidential brand is his great, loving
humanity, right?
It would not have changed in that regard. He was a much, more, flinty character when he was young. I mean, he was not like, he didn't have this great, sort of aura of superhumanity that he has now. So I'm not surprised that he did that then, being the person that he was then, but a lot's changed. So this really surprised me to hear this. And I'm hoping they change their mind. Well, they have to. The immorality of what happened with Afghanistan is overwhelming, regardless of what we do. Just the fact that we helped set up a situation that caused a great trauma in our own country, and then went and created a great trauma in their country. And I shouldn't say we created it. Their country was already in trauma, but we exacerbated it. And were unable to achieve the things that most people knew they couldn't achieve. That was the big neocon dream. Remember, that was their whole thing, was they were going to turn the Middle East into the flowering of democracy. Every country, they were going to make it all into Jeffersonian democracies. It was absurd. We all were watching this going, are you kidding? Nothing has ever seemed as naive as what they had in their mind, to use military force to create something like that, and at the point of a gun. But they apparently thought they could do it, and that experiment went horribly awry. And the immorality of that we're going to have to live with. And the lesson of that, again, in my lifetime, twice now, we've had to withdraw from wars that left, terrible carnage behind us, and left the people there to their own devices. And in Vietnam, they have recovered now. It's been a long time, of course, and there was tremendous suffering, but they did manage to do that. My hopes are that Afghanistan will be able to do that too. Nothing would make me happier than to see the country pull itself together and be able to create something of a self-governance that doesn't include a repressive, authoritarian, fundamentalist religious sect that wants to, basically, oppress women and anyone who's not a, patriarchal male. But whatever happens, the idea that we would not help these people who helped the U.S. through 20 years of that occupation, it's unacceptable. I mean, it is absolute. I mean, even, I mean, Gerald Ford, opened the doors for the Vietnamese refugees to come here. And you remember the horror of all of that too. I mean, the boat people and everything, people escaping. And this is another one of those situations, and we have to do it. I mean, we have to do it. And if Joe Biden can't do that, well, then, none of this really makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, if everything about it, yes, we need to get out, it's expensive, and we shouldn't have our troops in danger, blah, blah, blah. But, we have to get out because it's the wrong thing to do. And part of the only way we can right any of that is to bring those people here or somewhere. I mean, whatever. I mean, they've got to go somewhere.
Well, and let's be clear, like the argument that it's better for Afghanistan at this point, for us to leave is, there's an argument that it's not. I mean, there's, the Afghani, I mean, there's a reason why Blinken's over there, and he is, saying like, we're not going to totally abandon you. We're going to have drones, and we're going to have special ops or something like that, which,
there will be CIA there for sure.
Of course, which we have everywhere.
Yeah.
And, it is because it is bad for us to be there, that we have an ongoing war that is, the longest war that we've ever been involved in. I would say, if we would have put more troops in there, but, look, we've killed in Afghanistan, the civilian numbers are sort of hard to figure out because we underreport how many we killed. But I think like the official numbers, probably like 40, 50,000 civilians have been killed as a direct function of us. Maybe 30,000 as a direct function of us. But, there's an underreporting that we always get with the drone warfare in particular. But what we need to, I mean, this is, we need this country to go through a period of reparations. And I'm looking at this hemisphere and the other, and frankly, within our country. But Heather, that's all the time that we have this week. We'll see you again in the future. Thank you so much for your time.
Anytime.
Today. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, we got to take a quick break. We'll be right back.